Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great Monday, and I'm glad that you're joining us here. It is my pleasure to announce that, as I've had before, that we have on right now a longtime friend. How long have we known each other, Scott? Since '98, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little over 20 years.
Holy fick, holy! Uh, my longtime friend Scott McKibben, who is the executive director of the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum Joint Powers Authority. And Scott is here to talk about arguably the best deal in Coliseum Joint Powers Authority history. But I'm going to take it from here and say, hey, Scott, first of all, welcome once again. And tell my viewers about the Raiders Lease Extension and what it is, where it fits in the context of the history of deals of this type in our Coliseum history.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Zenny. I appreciate the opportunity to chat a few minutes about it. Yes, this was really a long lease process, as you know, and the highlights of the lease are this: you have to start out with the premise that in past years we have continually lost money on the Raiders being in town. The way our contract is set up is, they pay a lease, and we get some sharing of revenues from things such as concessions and parking, club dues, and so on. And as recent as, let's just say, last year, we were about $1.5 million behind in the hole. And so when we put this lease together, we wanted to make sure that we made money. We wanted to also provide an opportunity for the Raiders to play in 19, have an option for 20 if the stadium doesn't get done in time. So the major components of the lease are this: we increased the rent by $4 million, from $3.5 million to $7.5 million. And I think it's interesting to note that in 4 years we've taken their rent from $900,000 now to $7.5 million. So we've been aggressive in that area, and we've been able to show good improvement. The lease is also set up so that the authority, regardless of how things come in, we will have a $2 million surplus. In other words, we are pro-forming that we will do $11.4 million in revenue, which is the rent and the concessions and the club dues and the parking. And we have budgeted or pro forma $9.4 million for game day expenses. We pay all game day expenses, including field conversions when we take the field from baseball to football back to baseball. If by chance the expenses go over, it's capped at 9.4. The Raiders must pay everything over 9.4 million. If there is a shortfall of 11.4 million on the expenses, on the revenues, the Raiders have to make up the shortfall. If by chance expenses come in lower than 9.4 million, which I think they will, because we budget 4 field conversions every year because we're not certain of exactly what the schedule is going to be when the NFL gets us. Major League Baseball, as you know, is going to be starting in a couple of weeks. Their schedule is set. Mm-hmm. And so the first $500,000 of savings on expenses, we at the authority keep $250,000 of it, or half of it. So our surplus would move up to $2,250,000. The remaining $250,000 goes to the public benefit fund to be distributed to charities in Alameda County and the city of Oakland. Now, anything over $500,000 in savings goes directly to the Raiders. So we're incentivizing the Raiders, and ourselves for that matter, to manage expenses efficiently. Other highlights of the deal are we had a parking dispute that went back about 4 years. When I first got here, we noticed that we weren't receiving the parking revenues on the way we were calculating things from the Raiders. We went back in and we did a reconciliation, found out that we were short. And so we have been able to settle that. That has been outstanding now for about a year and a half.
Congratulations.
And we are receiving $750,000 to settle that. And that will be paid to us by June 1st. The next major piece is the naming rights. Historically, going back 3 seasons ago when we had a naming rights partner, Overstock.com, O.co, we had to split the naming rights revenue with the Raiders. In the new deal, because of the uncertainty of whether the Raiders would be here or not be here, the people that I've been talking to about naming rights, we will retain 100% of the naming rights. So if by chance we went and did a deal for $1 million, we would retain the entire $1 million. So it's a very solid deal for us. In 2020, the rent goes up another $3 million, which means that the surplus would be about $5 million rather than $2 million. And I would say this: it's like any deal, Zenny. It's not perfect. When you do a negotiation, everybody gives a little, everybody takes a little, and so not everybody got everything they wanted. But I think we got most everything of what we wanted and we needed. So I'm really satisfied with the outcome.
Do you look back over the history of how we got to this, the lawsuit, Mr. Davis saying he was going to find someplace else to play how the Raiders play, watching that play out? Do you look back over all of that and then say, wow, what a crazy world?
Well, sometimes, but the marketplace is different these days, and we're disappointed that we weren't able to get a longer-term deal with the Raiders and get a stadium built and have them remain here long-term. But once that conclusion was real, the next best thing was, how do we keep the Raiders here for both the fans, and also keep in mind, we employ about 3,000 people on game day. There are a lot of folks where these jobs are important. And you also have the additional economic impact in the community to places like hotels and motels, to restaurants, to other ancillary service industries in town, that when there's a Raider home game, there's a real positive impact. So getting past the fact that we were not able to keep them long term, we were able to get the next best thing, which was this deal.
Take us through the history of deals in Coliseum JPA lore. Where does this fit?
Well, our rent is now going to be, one of the higher rent rates in the league. However, you have to counterbalance that with every other team in the NFL pays all of their own game day expenses.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, there are places that, the rent is let's just say Denver.
Mm-hmm.
The Broncos pay $3.2 million, which is kind of the median point of what teams are playing. There are some below, some above, but let's just say it's in the $3 million range. The teams keep most of their concession revenue. They keep most of their parking and so on, but they pay all their game day expenses. So those authorities are making, $3.5 million a year, just the way their deal is set up. So, all in all, ours is still, if you look at it in its totality, is now getting up closer to the average of other NFL teams. But historically, it's been very, very low. But now we're in a much improved position. There's no question about that.
I remember you saying to me something I think I can mention in this space, but you said you were giving the Raiders going to get a taste, just a taste of what they're going to expect in Las Vegas. And I guess by that you meant the cost of the bond issue and everything else. It's going to be a different world for them there, yeah?
It is. I mean, I'm not sure what their rent is there. It's probably pretty low. But on the other hand, they are going to have to pay all of their game day expenses. But they also get to keep all the non-football related revenue, but they've got debt service. And, I'm not exact. You hear different numbers all the time, and that's really their business. I'm not going to try and speculate on that. But on the football side of the business, in Las Vegas, they are now in a situation that is going to be much closer here in Oakland to what they will experience when they're in Las Vegas.
However, the game day expense part is a big deal. a note: the Raiders don't pay rent; it's zero because of the gigantic size of the debt that they have to pay back Bank of America, which essentially is their landlord.
Yeah.
What about the naming rights situation with Ring Central? Where is that right now? Uh, I know you mentioned it once before, but I want my viewers to.
Well, we're in some really meaningful discussions with them right now. They're serious. We're serious. We're negotiating and discussing terms and timelines and so on. And I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to get that deal done.
A friend of mine asked me this question. Actually, a number of people who are viewers and supporters of the live stream said that they overheard something that the Raiders could be in Oakland for as long as 3 years. What about that? Because there was some brief talk that led in that direction during the JPA meeting. Can you shed some light on that?
I've heard nothing about a third year. Looking at where the stadium is on construction-wise and talking to people, I think that without question that they'll be in it in 2021, unless something totally unforeseen happened. And I really don't see that happening because, unlike Minneapolis, Minnesota, where you've got weather conditions to have to deal with and so on, Las Vegas really doesn't have a lot of that. So I would expect that the Raiders, we may have them for 2, but I would not at all think that there's a third year in play. But you never know, Zenny. Something catastrophic could happen. There could be an unforeseen issue come up. I don't know what it would be, but I'm rather certain that they will be in Vegas playing for sure in 2021.
And so this is not the next step for the lease. It goes to the Oakland City Council meeting, right? And
it goes to the county tomorrow. It goes to the city, I believe, on Thursday, and then it will be done.
And those should be formalities because I would think. A number of council members have talked to me. They're very proud of the deal and what you've done. I know Noel Guile was quite effusive publicly over the deal.
Well, I don't foresee any problems, but I'm not on the council, and I'm one of those guys that kind of believes in the old philosophy that it's not done till it's done. So I'm going to say that I think and would hope that this would go through. And I'm sure that if I was a council person, I would sit back and say just what I said to you earlier. It's not a perfect deal, but it is a significant improvement. And when you consider the parking settlement and the jobs and a number of other things associated with it, I think that without question, it merits everybody's approval.
Hey, so there was, when I came on, and this goes way back, there was a punch list of items that were to be done that were 146 in number. And right now, I don't expect you to recite that because I think that was far before you came along. But what are some other improvements to the Coliseum that you're working on that you'd like my listeners to know about, and viewers?
Well, in the last couple of 3 years, we've put in all new scoreboards on both the north and south side. We added a dual LED ribbon, which can be used for, obviously, sponsors and promotional space. That scoreboard was scoreboards and LED was $12 million. We've added new concessions and bars. We've improved some of the seating. We continue to work on getting totally over to 4G for Wi-Fi access.
Yeah.
We continue, as you know, the Raiders use most of our parking. They do a lot of tailgating. We've invested a great deal of money the last 3 years, at least on my watch in the time. I don't know what was done prior to my coming, but we've continued to try and do a great deal on the parking lot in terms of keeping it in good shape. So, we've put millions and millions of dollars in capital into the facility. both for the Raiders and the A's, not just the Raiders, but for the Raiders and the A's, and also for our own events. Because once the Raiders leave town, we're going to have this facility for ourselves, August through January.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a slight period of time there when we have to, kind of schedule around baseball. But that's really only for the last couple of weeks in August and the month of September. And so, big outdoor concerts and events or festivals or soccer games or neutral site college football games, we have been out of that market because we can't accommodate it because of baseball and football. When the Raiders leave, that won't be a problem any longer. We'll have a lot more inventory flexibility to use the building.
I know we've talked about this before we officially came on, but now that we're on, can you talk to my viewers about the snag, the outstanding issue? Because I have a person who calls themselves, I can't make this up, Lumber and Leather, who says, did you go over the outstanding issue that nearly held up the lease? I got in a bit late. So this is a perfect time to talk about that. What happened, Scott?
Sure. Address that, Zenny. The training and practice facility over in Alameda that the Raiders use was part of their relocation here when Mr. Davis brought the team back.
Mm-hmm.
And it is their building. They own it. They operate it. They maintain it. They pay taxes. They do all of that. And when they leave, the master agreement reads that they are to turn the facility back over to us. It's deeded back to us. We get the land, get the building, and then the loan amount that was used to build it is forgiven. The Raiders wanted to exercise a right late in this negotiation process to turn the building over to us now. And we were not willing to do that. We did not want to do that. We told them that, the reason that was put in there was that in case the team ever did move, Mr. Davis wanted to make sure that they had a place to practice and play if there was a transition period from one site to the other. And we understood that, and we will accommodate that. They can use that facility when they leave for 36 months. But they're not going to be able to exercise the option to turn it back to us until they leave and are no longer playing football here in Oakland. And so we got that matter cleared up, and it came to our attention, but it came late, and it took us a couple of days to work it through with everybody's attorneys. But we got it worked out to everybody's satisfaction, and it's not a point at all. It's not it was not a contentious issue at the end.
Because it was brought up in such a secretive way. The assumption was, oh my God, this is like this really nuclear thing. It's like, but it's great that.
Well, we tried hard to not make it into something bigger than it was, but on the other hand, we did need to communicate to the public and to the fan base and to everybody that the reason that we were not getting the meeting approval done when we had originally thought we might was because this was presented to us, and so we had to take about a week delay to get it dealt with, and then we rescheduled the meeting for last Friday.
Could we have gotten these deals had we had, or an adversary had you had an adversary or less than professional relationships with the Raiders? What I'm getting at is a lot of this at the end of the day really comes down to personal relationships, right?
Yeah, it's like any other big deal. There's a certain level of trust and credibility. And, I do want to publicly commend particularly Mark Bedane, team president. After they pulled their offer off the table, my view, and I told the board this, was let's just keep ours on the table. Let's take the high road. Let's let the Raiders go and do their due diligence and shop around and look at some other places. But keep in mind that, we got a great fan base here. We've got a great facility here. We know Coach Gruden wants to play here because there's no way that he wants his players and his coaching staff to be getting on a plane going someplace all 16 games.
Right.
So, our view was let's just show some patience. I understood Mark Davis's, emotional reaction early to a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have expected anybody to, be jumping up and down for joy when they found out they were being sued. On the other hand, the legal action is the legal action. It's going to happen. Okay, so at some point in time, it's probably best to just park that issue. If you recall, we had a similar issue when we did the lease extension for the last 2 years for the Warriors here at Oracle. There was the whole issue of the debt at the arena.
Mm-hmm.
And, when Rick Welch and I sat down and talked about it, we just finally concluded, something? Let's take the whole debt issue. It's going to be a dispute. It's going to have to go to mediation and arbitration. Let's just set it aside. That will be handled in its own unique way. But let's focus on just doing the lease that allows the team to play here and for the authority to benefit from their being here. And that's what we've ended up doing with the Raiders. The lawsuit for the city of Oakland proceeds. This lease does nothing to impact that at all.
I have a question from Hardcore Raider, which I think really is based on a headline I saw, but here it goes. This question for Scott, please. Do you think the fans will show up, will fill up the stadium this year more than last year? What is the vibe from Raider fans and support, as much as you can answer?
My view on attendance and fan support has always been this.
Mm-hmm.
If they win, we'll fill this place.
Mm-hmm.
If we have another 4-12 season, you can expect that attendance may not be what everybody hopes it will be.
Mm-hmm.
But if they play well and they put a good product on the field, I think that without question, we'll fill this place. If you recall, when John was here the first time back in 98, 99, 2000, 2001, and the upper deck was still open then,
Mm-hmm.
and we were seating approximately 62,000 people in the stadium, we were winning. We were going to AFC Championship games. We had people hanging from the rafters.
Yep.
This place was full.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely full. I would expect that if we have a 10-6, 11-5, even a 12-4 season, and we're in contention for a playoff spot,
Mm-hmm.
this place will be jammed. It'll be full.
Hey, just one observation I'd like to get your reaction to in the closing moments we have with you. I felt that some of the reason why there may have been a game that it didn't look like it was well attended had to do with the campfire and the other natural disasters that we faced, or, depending on how you look at the disaster we faced, in particularly in the northern Bay Area, where there are a lot of Raiders season ticket holders around Napa and the wine country and everything else. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that without question, that in the first 2 or 3 weeks of those natural disasters, that it probably had an effect on attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you say, accurately so, that there is a real fan base that goes, as far as 100 or 150 miles away, driving distance. Obviously, we have the Southern California LA contingency that comes up. But there isn't any doubt that when you get to places, Santa Rosa, Napa, Sonoma, Healdsburg, all up in there, and even to a certain extent, when you get all of the impact of the smoke and everything that hit down into places like Fairfield and Vacaville and Stockton and so on, my guess is that there were some games in the early going where that affected attendance.
Hey, I got to get your reaction before we let you go here. On Wednesday night, Zenny 62 at 8:30, I'm going to have JJ Lasley on, and his to talk about the Freedom Football League and the Oakland Panthers. They're supposed to be coming to the Coliseum. What's the story, Scott?
Well, I've had some discussions with the Freedom Football League.
Mm-hmm.
I do like their business model. I do believe that without question for spring football in America today, as do most of the coaches. Whether we're going to be able to accommodate any kind of a scheduling with them is yet to be determined because of the whole issue with the A's playing in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say to you, it's too early for me to say anything, too firm right now, but we certainly have an interest in a football team coming here. It's real football. and it is played at a time of the year where there's a real fan interest. And so, we're just going to play it out here and continue to do our research and our discussions and explore the opportunity. And, sometime in the next 3 or 4 months, we'll be able to determine whether we can do it or not.
And then there's arena football, right, coming?
Well, we're looking at arena football. We've had the arena football people in here actually a couple of times now. And, I told them that I've been busy trying to get this Raider deal done. So sometime late this week and moving forward, we'll get back with the arena people. They are coming back up here to take another look at the building and do a site visit and so on. Arena football would start in 2020. And with the Warriors gone, we obviously have the inventory at the arena, so we can, without question, accommodate arena football.
Well, Scott, this has been a fun conversation. Oh, by the way, I want to ask. I walked through the East Side Club and I saw the tree house and then the redone bar area. That was all paid for by the A's, right?
That is correct. The A's paid for all of that. We did some minor things interiorly, but it's 95% of that was paid for by the A's.
Wow, that's something else. They really are committed to Oakland. It seems, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, Dave Cabell has been terrific to work with, and his people, and we continue to try and work closely with them also on how we prioritize capital expenditures at the arena, at the stadium, because obviously we want to do everything we can to accommodate, enhancing the fan experience for the baseball team, because they're going to be our long-term tenant.
Yeah.
They are here and they're committed. And so we're going to do everything we can on our side of the ledger to help where we can.
Oh, hey, I got to ask you real quick. What can we do as fans to help get the Pac12 Championship at the Coliseum, at the arena, rather than the T-Mobile in Las Vegas?
Call Larry Scott.
You got it.
And Larry is a good friend. He was kind of one of my bosses when I ran the Rose Bowl. He and the commissioner of the Big Ten. And, Larry and I have chatted about it, but, what they're going to do the next time around, I don't know. But obviously, we've got an airport, we've got mass transit, we've got hotels, we're close to college campuses. We think we'd be a great place. And, at 53 to 55,000 seating capacity, that's just about perfect. And we've got ample parking. We think we could do a heck of a job of putting on a good Pac-12 championship game for them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So if one of Larry's people is listening, I hope they're listening closely.
We'll get this out there to them. Hey, Scott, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate the good work you do, Zach. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Hey, man, thanks. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Okay, see ya. Thanks. All right. So, folks, that was a longtime friend Scott McKibben. And Tervel, I meant to get in. You said when the Raiders leave, will they bring back NCS championship games and possible state championships in high school football? And I'll ask about that. I'll ask him off camera. But I think the answer is this. You're looking at the guy who started Oakland's only active sports commission, the Oakland Alameda County Sports Commission. And I did that in 1999. I kind of did it on a bet. I bet then Oakland City manager Robert Bob, who was my boss, that I could start the sports commission and get federal tax approval for it in less than 2 years' time. Then Oakland City Attorney Jane Williams said it was going to take me. I did it in 4 months. Okay. So and I also did it because we were in the middle of trying to form a bid, and we did form a bid to host the 2005 Super Bowl. Within that effort, I also started the Oakland Super Bowl 39 bidding committee. So we lost to Jacksonville on the third ballot. It came down to, out of 11 cities, came down to Oakland, Jacksonville and Miami for the right to host the 2005 Super Bowl. Jacksonville won mainly for political reasons. We were in the middle of a lawsuit with the Raiders. Sound familiar? Yeah, I was doing this in the middle of a lawsuit that I didn't create. It was in a situation I didn't create, and hey, arguably almost won. But that's the last time we had a sports commission. And Jerry Brown, just being honest, I've talked about it before. He refused to meet with me about it. And I wrote to my board after I went to the Joint Powers Authority that Scott now runs. And this is when Ignacio de la Fuente was the chair, and Dina McClain was in Scott McKibben's role. And Dina said, okay, as the executive director, said this, and Dina's a very nice person, but this is the way it went down. She said this in a meeting we had between myself, Larry Reed sitting over here, Scott Haggerty, Alameda County Supervisor. Of course, Larry Reed's Oakland City District 7 City Council member. Scott Haggerty's Alameda County Supervisor sitting here. Sunil Marinichi, who was then and still is now a county administrator. And Donna, her right hand, and Gail Steele, Alameda County Supervisor. Anyway, Dina McClain says, and I quote, "I don't get this thing called sports sponsorship." Okay? Keep in mind, she's was the executive director of the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum complex. Same role that Scott holds today. All right, that was what I was up against. So the Coliseum Joint Powers Authority took a vote of no action, and during the speech, I learned that they were having meetings with a splinter group of CEOs. No one told me, and that included then Oakland Mayor Jerry Brown. So I wrote an email to my board, and I accused Jerry of not being comfortable with a person who's African American, who, was intellectually inclined and was running something. And this had been brewing for a couple of years. Okay, a couple of years of Jerry not, meeting with me, of saying to my face he didn't have time for me, the whole 9 yards. And finally it came out to that. And so he wanted me to quit, or he wanted me to leave after he saw the email. And he says, "Are you going to apologize for the email?" And I said, "Well, no." And I didn't. Well, with that went, unbeknownst to me, an $80,000 grant that the City of Oakland's Economic Development Organization had created for my sports commission as a reward for my work. And so Jerry didn't want to honor that. All right. Just because I said what I said in an email, as opposed to meeting with me and saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry. You did a great job. We should have talked to you. We should have respected you for your title and what you did." I got none of that. Okay. I got none of that. That's the last time we had a sports commission, and I had an organization that was poised to go after events to go into our facilities, like Oracle, we now call Oracle Arena, the stadium, the Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center, pretty much anywhere we could place them. Paramount, high schools. We have a number of high schools that have great sports facilities. Skyline has a great football field, for example. So does Oakland High. The city was our canvas upon which to paint a glorious combination of sports events. Then, I haven't counted with how many there are now. They're probably maybe double that. But then there were at least 212 sports events. Things that you wouldn't think of that you can bid on. And this is why I say this, Turville. For example, fencing. The regional fencing championships. You can bid to host that. Of course, there's the NCAA Elite Eight. There's the Final Four. There's the Pac12 Championship, both in basketball and football. There was chess. And now there's, for example, there's CrossFit. That's why I said the numbers doubled, because back then we didn't have CrossFit. And I say back then, I'm talking about like 1998, 99, going into 2000s. CrossFit was something that, if it were around at all, was known by a handful of people. But now CrossFit is far more than a thing. CrossFit is a major industry, is a major sports sub-industry within the sports industry, right? A sports commission in Oakland could clean up in terms of having CrossFit-oriented events in Oakland. We could become the center, the West Coast center for CrossFit events if we wanted to with a sports commission. That's what sports commissions do. They market your facilities for use by the producers of events who are looking for places that want to have those events. Got it? That's what sports commissions do. That's what a sports commission would do in the case of getting the NCS championship games and the state championship games of high school football and everything else. All right. Sports commissions even can create their own sports events. You know, we have the Oakland Running Festival, for example. So, because right now everything happens on a kind of a haphazard, unplanned, piecemeal way. This person has their little effort, that we don't have anything coordinated. So when the Raiders do leave for Las Vegas, officially, I will remain as the only person in Oakland history to have formed a bid for the city to host the Super Bowl in Oakland. All right, folks. I'll be back later tonight. Thanks for tuning in, and God bless you.